Okay. Making sure that we're on. All right, perfect. We are live. All right, I'm excited.
All right.
Perfect. So, man, peace and blessings to y'all. Stan PK Collins in the cyber world, the internets, as we like to call it. I'm very excited about what we got going on here today. This is the first of 5 reasonings that we're hosting online during the afternoon hours around this time, whether you're working virtually or you're one of those few back in person, you should be home from work, most of y'all, you know, so we decided to just do something here where we're talking about our struggle, the current struggle that's going on right now. So, you know, since about May 25th, which was African Liberation Day, you know, for a lot of people who don't know, a lot of events have been going on that really turned the world onto the struggles of Black people. And for more than a month now, Black people have taken to the streets, and, you know, the anger of George Floyd's death, as well as that of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and countless other brothers and sisters, has really forced America to at least look like it's trying to change for the betterment of Black people, you know. And we right here are at a time when people more than ever are awake. If they weren't awake yesterday, if they were calling people hotep, stuff like that, they're awake now, you know. And the danger in that, for those of us who have been involved in the movement for a long time, I want to explain this, and I want people to know that this is not a matter of ego. This is a matter of educating, enlightening, and reasoning with people and helping them understand the totality of what is going on. You know, this did not just happen yesterday. It did not start with George Floyd, no matter what people would like you to think. This was organizing over years and decades, you know, since the last big police brutality event that really brought people outside. You know, people can say Michael Brown did that, you know, Trayvon Martin did that, Sandra Bland did that, right? In between those events, there were people working, right, advancing the causes of Black people here in America, and not just to integrate into a system. We were talking about working in the interest of self-determination, right? So today's reasoning, as well as that, the other reasonings that we're having, are really about what it is that the fight right now for Black people, what does that mean for us people who are, why is it important right now that we gain an international consciousness? That is what we're talking about today. We have to gain an international consciousness, and we have to redefine and define for ourselves who we are in this struggle. This is not a struggle to integrate into the US system. It's not a struggle to get reforms or to be accepted or to have people who are non-Black like you and to be, you know, kumbaya and side by side with other races. That is not that type of fight. This is a fight for self-determination and a fight to get everything that we want, because it is more than police brutality. Do not let them tie it just to police brutality. We're talking about a system that is not only oppressing us here in the United States, but is oppressing us in North America, that is oppressing us in the entire world, most especially Mama Africa. So tonight, what we are talking about is Pan-African federalism. It is a system, right, through which African people are united and where we're taking care of our problems internationally. International problems, right, require international solutions. I'll say it one more time. International problems require international solutions. So I want all of y'all, and I got Sis Kim Poole coming through right now. She's a sister who knows very well what it means to be international. I'll have her talk, you know, in just a second, as well as Baba Senghor. But right now, I'm just laying the framework for what we're discussing here tonight. We're discussing the current battle for our self-determination in international terms. And remember, I say self-determination. I am not a reformist. I am not an integrationist. I am not somebody who is of the mind that we need to sit at the table with people who haven't even written us as men and women in their constitution. We have to act as though we are building our nation of our own, a Pan-African nation, right? And one where we're getting sovereignty on a global scale. And Pan-African federalism is the means of doing that. So in order to explain Pan-African federalism, what I want to do tonight for the reasoning, I'm not just going to sit here and talk. I have guiding text. I just want to put one text out there, right, that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about, right? Africans coming together globally, Black people here in the United States identifying with Africa, and most especially Africa being strong enough in order to play a diplomatic position to help Black people in the United States. Those are the three things that we want to talk about today. African identity, Africans helping us here in the United States, and us looking at ourselves pretty much in that regard. So I'm gonna pretty much, I have a text right here by Cheikh Anta Diop. All right, and Cheikh Anta Diop, very, very, very important scholar in the sense that he, in this book called Black Africa, he broke it down for us pretty much in terms of what Pan-African federalism means. And Pan-African federalism, when it is realized within the next decade, Pan-African federalism is the fulfillment of the Casablanca Bloc's vision of the United African States. So the Casablanca Bloc, for those of y'all who don't know, during the 1950s and 60s, during the African liberation movements, there was a question of what direction the newly independent countries were going to go in. Were they just going to sit as independent states, or were they going to go into a federation? And you had two blocks, Casablanca Bloc and the Monrovia Bloc. Monrovia Bloc was more gradual. You know, it's sort of like what you see today, everybody separate. And Casablanca was more about unity, unifying the African continent. And the Pan-African Federalist movement is a fulfillment of that vision. You know, seeing to it that we put into action what Kwame Nkrumah called us to do before his exile, you know, and before his transition. At the time when he talked about the United African States, people really thought that it was out of a desire for him to be president of Africa. And they thought that it was an idea that was just too unattainable. But give me a second, I gotta. So a United African vision, and people talk about, well, how unattainable that was. Africa can't unite, you know, but at the same time, Europe has united, right? They have NATO, they have the EU, okay? They have, you know, their bodies and their conglomerates where they all come together, while at the same time, people are telling us that Africans can't unite across the globe because, you know, they can't even see Africans on the continent uniting. They're saying there are so many countries and different ethnicities. We're all different, you know, there's so much strife. You know, can we speak to that part real quick? You know, just let's speak to the ethnic differences, so-called, that people have about Africans across the diaspora. You know, how do we see past that? Whoever wants to go first. You know, once again, welcome to the reasoning, y'all.
Greetings. Let my sister go, Kim. Kim can go first. Good to see Kim.
I say.
No problem. I'm sorry I can't be on the camera tonight, family. First and foremost, I just want to thank you, Sam, for convening this space. Baba, Senghor, of course, your eldership and leadership is crucial to the movement. I want to say that, you know, having an understanding of yourself through someone else's definition is the reason that we've allowed narratives like this to persist. We are the rhythm people, but we understand our similarities because we're all suffering from different expressions of the same phenomenon. And it's not that we're trying to define ourselves through struggle. It's just that we understand how we've been able to continually overcome struggle after struggle after struggle. And as a result, therein, our history unites us. We are connected in that way. I think that honestly, where we should focus is on the basics, right? Building relationships, effective communication. I think that we have allowed so many other people to serve as a medium in between our ability to communicate. Basic things. We don't own our own media outlet. Sam, I appreciate all that you're doing in journalism. As soon as we got WhatsApp on and popping, we sold it to Facebook. I mean, just basic tools that we need to facilitate dialogue. We don't know each other. That's why we see it as unrational, irrational for us to work as a Pan African federalist movement. We don't know each other. We only have ideas about who we are. Sometimes when I go to the continent, to various countries, I'm the first Black person from the US that a lot of my brothers and sisters have ever met. That's crazy in 2020. That is insane. When Marcus Garvey organized without email, if he can do it, we can do it. And I think we'll realize that though we have a lot of difference, that our differences are beautiful differences and they make us stronger. And we have a lot more in common than we acknowledge. And once we get a lot closer together, we'll begin to celebrate the beauty of our difference.
Yay, Bo, thank you for that. Well, you know, Sam, I'm just going to keep it real simple. That like my sister Kim, she's very clear that rhythm and culture are critical. We're already together in terms of that. Everybody loves great music. Everybody moves to great music. But I want to say African lives matter. And I say African lives matter because it's critical for us to look at the reality that we're not a minority people. We're majority people. We're all over the world, not just in Africa. We're all over. What the importance of this reasoning is critical because no matter how long we've been in the movement, no matter whether you're whatever age you are coming into the movement, Sister Kim hit the nail on the head. You got to know yourself. You got to not only know yourself, you got to communicate with others. You got to be prepared to build your family, build your neighborhood, build your community, build your nation, build internationally, because that's where the power is really at. Everybody else does it. Everybody's race first. There's nothing wrong with us being race first or dealing with our own interests first. Some people like to beat down on that. Some people like to beat down on what we call Pan-Africanism or nationalism. But the reality is, if you look around the world, that is what everybody else does. And we being those first human beings in the world, I mean, the cradle of civilization, all humanity comes from us. I mean, we don't need to debate that. But the reality is, why we're on the bottom of the rung is because we're doing everybody else's bidding. We're working for everybody else rather than working for our own self-interest, particularly in Africa, but not just Africa. In North America, we built North America, South America, Canada, the UK. You can go anywhere you want and you're not gonna find any civilization that we didn't have our hand in. Now, the reality is they didn't have any knowledge of anything until the African continent rose up and built. And we can go back to ancient Kemet or Nubia, but I'm not gonna go back that far. The sister mentioned Garvey and the Garvey movement. Marcus Garvey came along at a time when the Jim Crow era was still in full effect. Mental slavery, as he always talked about, was in full effect. And it wasn't just Garvey the individual. Garvey called on Africans all over the world who came together 100 years ago and established a serious model still being worked on today. But it's not just about people being apart and knowing yourself and hooking up with the UNIA. Every entity, cultural organizations, artistic organizations, civic organizations, political organizations, economic organizations have to come together. None of those organizations exist without individuals, people. And unfortunately, the Eurocentric world teaches us, you know, get yours and don't worry about the next, this individual thing. We got to get off of that. It ain't about me, he or she. It's about we collectivity. Always been, always will be.
You hit a lot of good points, Bob. Forgive me.
That's all right.
It's astounding to me how they sold us the idea of individuality while at the same time practicing the same group economics and the same collaboration and the same. They conspire on a global scale, you know, and they've been really good at misusing words and twisting words in order to wrangle us in our identity. The whole beef between Black and African, for example, or
right.
even just
exactly.
how people have been able to, over the times, you know, with the whole Black and white spectrum, you know, if you if you talk to Walter White, you know, if you reach this nominal freedom or whatever, right? Blackness became not only just like something that you dealt with externally, but it also became something you dealt with internally. Not saying it wasn't, but now you have class warfare among us, right? So a lot of our people don't subconsciously, we don't see the possibility of us doing us right. You know, there's a lot of propaganda out there for us to tackle. You know, of course, we got Pan-Africanists who understand what it is and why, you know, you have so-called black on black crime, what that's about, why you have ethnic strife, but there are just people who still believe that their water's colder, you know, and it's because we got to redefine. How do we go about redefining, you know, that? Like, what, you know, I heard music, you know, I heard rhythm, I heard about making connections. You know, what else could we do? You know, what do you think?
I think the most important thing, and I want to let Sister Kim speak to that too, but the most important thing is to know yourself. And to know, you got to know yourself. And that does not come with just, how should I put it, you know, just being aware of your name. You have to go know where you come from. You have to know your historical ties, and you have to know how great we have been. And once you know that, you have to be very careful not to allow your individual personality and your ego to stop you from learning. A hip hop artist once said, the more you know, the more you should know you don't know. So I think you got to really keep it simple, Sam, but you got to also always know that no matter what level of education you have, no matter what level of schooling you're in, there's always something to learn. So you need other people. And I think we've been programmed to think that, you know, we're better than them or they're better than us. And that divisive thing that you spoke about. And we've been locked into that. And ever since the transatlantic slave trade, we have got caught up in this whole thing of a class thing, as you said, you know, and if I got mine, you know, I'm going to move on and I'm not going to deal with how I raised mine. All of that is a myth. Now, you said something about the music. It's important because rhythm is important. I like to call it Black Tricity. But we can go to a party and everybody be united and dancing on the one. So if we can do that, everybody can study together. Everybody can organize together. See, we cannot just celebrate and party together. We have to know we have to work together. And the only way out of this madness is collectively. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but we got to keep it real simple. And no matter how old you are, this whole thing of, you know, we've been there, done that. No, that's not true. The reality is older folks need to humble themselves to what our young brothers and sisters are doing, saying, and calling for. And we need to bridge those gaps, because if it were not for us, y'all wouldn't be around. And certainly if it were not for you all, we would have no future. So we are joined together, and we got to knock off all of this class stuff and all this, I'm better than you, I got a PhD, I got all that's Eurocentric stuff, man. And when you get into the music, you get back to the culture. And when the music in the hip hop generation, and I believe hip hop goes all the way back to ancient Kemet, by the way, you know, I'm a musicologist and I can prove that, but that's a whole nother story. But hip hop came into existence for young people finding themselves. And raw hip hop is raising consciousness. What did they do in the record industry? They started watering down the ways and means of getting positive messages out. So we have to be creative enough to create our own businesses, our own ways and means of getting our own messages out, and get away from this thing about we got to sign a contract with a record company, because that's divisive. And unfortunately, if you look historically at some Fela Kuti, Bob Marley, okay, none of them were born in the United States, but people in the United States love them. Okay, so there's no reason why you can't get with the culture of Bob Marley and the culture of Fela and the people of where they came from, if you hear what I'm saying.
Yes, Sam, I just want to make sure that I properly address what you said. I heard you mention two different things. First, you mentioned the relationship or the lack thereof between the historical African and the continental African. And then I heard you mention another divide often found in our people, and you referred to it as classism. Is that correct?
Yes, sister. Yep. Yep.
Okay. So then I want to add to what the Bible said. And I want to just begin by saying in the Teaching Artists Institute, the first thing we teach all of the people a part of our collective is that culture is the new currency. And the reason that we say culture is the new currency is because we've seemed to have forgotten that. And amnesia is a disease. So we want to remind them that, hey, culture is the new currency. So first, remember, but culture is the currency. We live by that. We subscribe to that. Let me tell you what we mean by that. We understand that a knowledge of self is important, but it's foundational because it should bring about a development. You are the fruit you bear. So once you know that culture is the new currency, you should begin to trade and build wealth in that currency. How do you do that? What happens when you no longer need the dollar bill? For example, me, a Black woman living in Baltimore, when I can eat, get food, when I can get protection, when I can get education, when I can have access to technology, when all the things that I need to exist in this realm, I have access to without using a dollar bill. What does that mean? That means that I've, one, created a community that can feed me, created a community that can educate me, that can keep me well and healthy, one that can keep me connected via technology with my international communities around the world, one that can keep me protected. Once we build a community that can provide us with those things within our network, we will devalue the dollar. We will devalue the currencies that have been given to us. Trust me, in the corona pandemic, in this pandemic, if there was a cure and it truly attacked us, whatever it is, if there was a deficit for food or water, your money wouldn't be able to buy it. If you needed it for your family, they would feed themselves. This is an era in time where you should be waking up. Look around you. There is going to be a crisis. And you need to ask yourself, what community am I a part of? If I can't go to the supermarket, how am I going to eat? Listen, culture is the new currency. Learn to feed yourself. Food sovereignty is important. That is indicative of African culture. If I can't find a way to send my kids to school because it doesn't look like they're going to start in August, how are my kids going to be educated? They must still learn. Find a community because culture is the new currency. Stick with your people, they will educate you. Find the homeschooling networks. That means that culture is the new currency. Guess what? When you have your food and you have your education and you have your technology, when it comes down to it, if they don't have it, they're going to take it from you. Protection is important. We must find ways to protect our community. This year, 2020, demonstrates to us that history repeats itself. Look at the Spanish flu. Look at the Red Summer, 1918 through 1920. This has happened before. This is not news for us. Everything you need, you'll find in your history. The African way is to stay connected to your history. So just look around that circular motion, and you'll see that they were burning down Rosewood. They burned Tulsa, Oklahoma to the ground. We built our own food networks. We've had food sovereignty before. We've built our own media systems. We've had that before. Our own forms of technology and education. And what didn't we have? Our own form of protection, and they burned it to the ground. So we've learned to devalue their currency. We will learn to do it again. So classism will mean nothing. Your money in this system will mean nothing when resources become depleted. When there's no longer food and there's no longer water, your classism is going to be something that you hang on a wall in a shelf in your house, if you still have it, because they're going to come with their guns, because it's not warm in Baltimore in the wintertime like it is in Gambia or Uganda. It's cold. So they might even put you out your own house so they can get a little warmth in the winter, because it's coming this fall. They say another form of the epidemic or the pandemic is coming again this fall. Keep us
Yeah, I
all
heard.
safe. At the end of the day, I think that answers a crucial point. Think about where the pandemic has struck. It's in Europe, it's in the West, what we call the United States, Canada, Mexico. Ain't done much to Africa though. Guess
Yeah.
what? You need somewhere to go. You're going to need a life raft. And for once in your life, you have an opportunity to see that money ain't everything. They have closed borders. Tanzania is the only country on the African continent that will even accept an American passport right now. They said, guess what? We don't care how much money you come. I can rebuild the economy, but I can't build lives. If people die, that's it. So we can find a way to get new money, but we can't find a way to get new people. So you, America, you stay in America. So guess what? This ship is sinking. We might have came on different boats, but we all in the same ship now. So whether you're an African that's from the continent or you're here historically through the Ma'afa, or what I would like to call a forced migration or the human cargo trade, I want you to know that we are all on the same line. And it's important for us to begin to identify who agrees and who doesn't.
Shay, I have a follow-up question, Sis Kim, if you don't mind. And I want Baba Senghor to answer the same question. I really want to get a sense of how y'all feel here. You know, from what you saw from May 25th on, to what degree are we getting that close? You know, building communities and being self-determined, really empowering our currency of relationships and culture. How close are we getting there from what you've been seeing since May 25th?
Well, I guess that question goes to me.
Yes. Yep.
Love that song. I don't know that guy. It was on the what was it? The Brawny commercial. I love that commercial. I love that song. And you know, I think that this era has given us an opportunity to show us who you walk with. And I think our people are rising. Africans are rising. Africans, continental Africans that I thought would never align with the Black Lives Matters movement. I saw young ones out on the front lines. A young sister lost her life, only 19 years old. African sister, continental. You see, the continental Africans that migrated here, that second generation, they're as disconnected from Black Lives Mattering as, I mean, the dollar bill itself. They are the highest expression of their parents' achievement. And their achievement is their attempt to ascertain and, you know, to secure European wealth. That's the only reason they will come here. And so their children, they go to European universities, they learn to think from European paradigms and a Eurocentric worldview. And that alienates them from Black Lives Mattering because it's the, you know, it's the least, you know, concern in their world. They're not connected. They can't relate. And so I feel like this period in time has given them an opportunity to kind of pull back the curtain on issues that they would have never even considered. I think Africans are rising. I think that we're more connected than we've ever been. And now is the time for us to take advantage of that rhythm. We are the rhythm people and the energy is moving. We need to take that vibration and elevate it and ensure that it is a result, like that it results in tangible outcomes before it's too late, because momentum doesn't last forever.
Yeah. Great, Sister Kim. Thank you so much for that reasoning. But let me say, Sam, straight to the point. May the 25th, African Liberation Day this year was a very, very interesting time. But I want to go all the way back to the beginning of 2020. And like what Sister Kim said is so important. Africans have been on the rise, but too many of brothers and sisters that don't know enough of themselves are not seeing the rising. And come May the 25th, and even before then with the pandemic, it has created a situation where people have to really check for what is real versus what is unreal. And seeing their brothers and sisters being brutalized, which is not new at all. It's been happening since we've been here. And it will continue to happen until we are successful in being powerful enough to be able to police our own communities and the police. Simple as that. However, May the 25th, something serious did happen. And Sister Kim is absolutely correct. It didn't just happen in the United States, it happened all over the world because the whole world was watching. And brothers and sisters rising up and being in lockdown many places during the pandemic, frustrated and having to deal with the false, well, I'm not going to even call it false, having to deal with the terrorist media and having to deal with white terrorism, simply exploded because we've been up this road before. Not only have individuals been killed through police brutality, as Kim mentioned so clearly, communities, African communities have been destroyed, demolished. People have been killed. People have been snatched off of buses and killed by people who are not even police. So we've been up this road before. You know, frustration set in, and fear is the major reason, in my opinion, that not only African people, but all kinds of people, particularly young people, afraid, not only from the pandemic, but afraid that they too could be victims of police brutality, said enough is enough. So yes, the answer to your question is change is in the air. However, we can't just expect the white terrorist system to all of a sudden one day, based on our demand, reform itself or bring any justice. We have to bring justice for our own selves through utilizing our real power, which is international power. That's why the Pan-Africanists are moving like they're moving. And we have to do everything we can to not only educate and agitate and elevate and provide information for younger brothers and sisters that may not know the Walter Rodneys, may not know the Patrice Lumumbas, may not know the Nanny Helen Burroughs, may not know the Thomas Sankaras. But those of us who have studied, we understand clearly the big picture is to become conscious and become more self-reliant and self-determined. That's why I said African lives matter. And it's no offense to anybody. I want to keep it real. The bottom line is Democratic Party and the Republican Party are not going to answer the problems for African people in North America. It's not going to happen. It wasn't created. They weren't created for that purpose. So yes, we have a right to demand. Now we can see Evanston, Illinois, North Carolina, New York, areas in New York dealing with the issue of reparations. So it has created an opportunity for us to have the right kind of conversations. And after conversations, we have to come into some practical manifestation of realities of what we're going to do for ourselves. But we have to go back to understanding we built pyramids, man. We got power once we are connected, know who we are. And I'm not going to say everybody got to go back to Africa. I want to make it real clear. Africa belongs to all Africans, but no matter where you are, you have a right to be treated properly as a human being. That's only going to come through the proper security from our own communities. And whether or not you're in Chicago, whether or not you're in LA, whether or not you're in DC, wherever you are, we have a right to protect our own communities. There are methods that I won't even get into talking about here that some people are working on because it's important. So I do see a progression, but I personally believe the spiritual war that's going on is the real war. I'm not saying that the war on other levels are not important, but we got to get connected spiritually. And that's where the culture is so important. And that's where the Pan-Africanism is so important. And that's where a United African States is so important. Because when we say a United African States, brothers and sisters, you can live in Southeast for the rest of your life, but you have every right as an African or a melanated Black person to gain from Africa, even if you don't go. Of course, I advocate everybody trying to go so that you can learn, like Sister Kim say, how important it is to see how much, despite our diversity, how much we have in common and how much power we really have. And I've had the opportunity of traveling many times to the continent and to South America, and I love it. You'll find more of yourself when you leave here. But certainly, for whether you're going to become an expatriate or not, we need to know these times are a wake-up call, and Kim is right. We can't blow it. We have to take advantage of it, raise the ante up, and focus on the real issues, because we don't want to just stop police brutality. We want to stop white terrorism against Africans, regardless to where they are.
Exactly, man. I want to thank both of y'all once again for coming on for the reasoning. A lot of points to touch on. One point I think we do need to touch on is stopping this, right? How do we go about stopping this in the context of Pan-African federalism and just political organization? That was one question that was on my mind throughout the entire conversation here. We're creating networks, we're building cultural bridges here. People are depending on one another and using resources as currency. How does that fit within the paradigm of United African States? Because if you look at federalism, what that means is that, formerly independent countries would turn into states underneath a federation where politically one person is a so-called president or a chairperson or something like that. The idea of a federation scares people, who are individualistic or people who care for self. We as human beings care for self, caring for ourselves and doing for ourselves is an instinct that is innately human. So when it comes to federalism, what I often encountered in talking to people is that, African people will not be able to unite with one person being at the head. They can't fathom, different units giving up power, so-called to the greater good. So how does that very suspicious of the political system? Right? Because when you talk about culture, you talk about education, people are all good, they're all for self-determination. But when you talk about politics, all of a sudden it's like I don't want to touch that. That sounds like the same old. Like, how do we reconcile those two? Because as an African, I know that they're one and the same. But how do we reconcile that though? Tangibly. That's the question I want to put out there. And at some point, I really do want to read a passage here. I need people to understand why it is that Mama Africa has not been able to act on our behalf. Just like, foreigners, parents' countries act on their behalf here for the to the United States. Mama Africa has not been able to do the same. And this book tells us why. Black Africa by Sheikh Anta Diop. I want to read a passage, but before I do so, I would just like to open the floor and have both of y'all speak to how we can reconcile for those together.
Well, I can go first because, I'm not a politician. So it's a real simple
Your
answer
cultural
for me.
legacy, though, sister. Your
I would
cultural
say,
legacy.
yeah, I appreciate that, Baba. I would say that, what a great problem to have, right? We can't be afraid of our own power. I think that if we can get to the point where we have a Pan-African federalist system that represents our interests, and our only problem is griping with the faulty leadership or the leader. What is this? You're saying the fear is that we're going to have to their and somehow bamboozle all of Pan Africa. Wouldn't that be a day? I'd love to deal with that problem in exchange for the white terrorism that we deal with now. So let's just work towards that goal. Unite us into a Pan-African federalist system. And hey, then I'll sit at the table with you and figure out how to expunge or get rid of that corrupt leader that maybe might come as a result of African greed or big man.
Yeah, I'm gonna be really, really short on this answer, brother. It's not a. You got to know the history. If you know your history and you know how great we were in Nubia, before Mr. Charlie or before other people even were in existence, we were living in peace and harmony way before the Berlin Conference. So if we could be like that at one time, we can get back to that. I believe that the people who speak to you about, well, we can never do that. That's a Eurocentric programmed answer, and they're speaking out of fear. And people have to accept the fact that the opposite of love is fear. If you love yourself and you love your people, you will go through any length, like Sister Kim said, to get to a point where you address those problems when you get to them, but you get rid of the major problems of white terrorism. Because see, technically speaking, there's more Africans on the planet. And if we represent the interests and we deal with the basics, and I'm not talking about just one group, I'm talking about all the groups together, dealing with the basics of food, clothing, and shelter. So you don't have to go to Piggly Wiggly, Safeway, and Giant, and you're growing your own food. So you don't have to worry about protecting your wife and your children. You have a secured, armed security, or an army to protect them. When you have those things in place, the problems that we confronted with around the table are forcing accountability of the leadership, because any leadership that's corrupt has to be removed, period. So we're not asking for no dictatorship, and we ain't asking for no demonocracy. The ancestors and those of us that are Africans make sure we keep accountability of whoever is in the leadership role, and hopefully it'll be a sister, because I think, you know, it's time for the Black woman. And the key thing with all of that is you got to get rid of your ego. Now, in closing, because of the Berlin Conference, a lot of the sovereignty that belongs to you and me and Africans that are outside of Africa goes to the neo-colonialists, because neo-colonialism is still in existence. So France, Germany, the UK, Portugal, et cetera, Spain, they still are reaping profits from Africa when we are not getting anything. And even the African populations are not getting just food, clothing, and shelter. So the reality is, as we educate, organize, and get to that point where we get to the table, we'll have problems that we can solve, brother. And the reality is our ancestors have gave us a lot of direction. Like Sister Kim say, if you know your history, you know enough of yourself, you know the most important thing in the world to have is your culture.
I say. Let's dig deeper into this reasoning. Before we do that, I just want to recognize Sis Najai. She just came on the line for the reasoning. At some point, when she's ready, you know, I'll have, you know, she can jump into the reasoning. The question I want to put out there for everybody, though, just piggybacking off what we talked about, you know, I really want to harp on this whole politics thing here, right? Because,
can you veggie back? Can you veggie back on it? Never mind.
I got you. No. Now we're gonna build on this because I'm of the mindset that there's politics and there's politics, right? Yes. People often get the politics that we're talking about confused with politics, you know, and that is what I'm not an activist, you know, I'm a reporter by trade, but I'm not an activist. Activism to me has been commercialized in this system where, you know, individuals get clout and they get, you know, money and they go into, you know, this role for nefarious egotistical reasons. I consider myself an organizer if I were to label myself as so, because we are organizing, we aren't mobilizing, we're organizing, and organizing is not sexy. Organizing takes work. Organizing takes understanding your paradigm and your cultural norms, just like y'all said, right? But how do we politicize that? How do we create a system? Because, you know, believe it or not, we had the first systems. It's just that the Urugu, they took their own systems to keep us interlocked in, you know, all of this madness and all of this confusion. But we always had systems. So if we're going to self-govern, how does the politics of African nation building look like? What does the daily life of an African underneath a federation look? You know, how do we settle disputes? How do we declare war? How do we do commerce? What is the language in our school systems? Like that, this is like real nuts and bolts stuff that is often going through my mind, you know? So I really want to lay that out on the table. And once again, man, this book right here, if you haven't done so, man, you got to read this, or at least a portion of it. It talks just about that, what a federation looks in terms of establishing an African paradigm. So the floor is open, y'all. You know, I just hope I was clear enough so that we can build.
Jumbo, everybody. My name is Najai. Thank you for the introduction earlier. That's a beautiful question to actually get down into it, into what it will look and feel like when you said, what language will our students speak in our schools? That brought me up the argument that I had with someone, not even an argument. Somebody tried to say that it was a post about Black-centered education. And I asked the person, do you mean African-centered? Do you mean an African-centered curriculum, or what is Black-centered curriculum? And they never actually responded, but somebody in the comments tried to come and say, you know, what is that? In Africa, da 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 da. Y'all not even anything. Y'all don't even speak the language. Y'all don't have a culture, and try to, like, you know, come at me. So I didn't get too deep into it with the person, but that's a valid point. How many of our African-centered schools are actually teaching an African language? You're not getting into the nitty-gritty of anything if you're still speaking English. You'll never get out of the matrix if you're still speaking English. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick and then open the floor for somebody else to finish answering that question. It's a beautiful question.
I got something to say on the language. My fault. Go ahead, sis Kim.
Well, I feel like what you're saying kind of brings me to a point that I often find when people tell me or ask, "Hey, you're a singer, Kim. What are you doing at this table?" And I'm literally sitting at a table with, presidents of republics in Africa, and they're like, "So I've got the president of this, the minister of that, and this girl that sings, right?" Like, I know that they're sitting in their head and they're thinking, like, "What are you even doing here?" And I bring that up because I want to remind us that culture is not just the music, right? It's not just painting and drumming, though we love the traditional arts. It's about innovation. It's about the art of possibility. It's about creativity and ideas. And so I think that when we over romanticize what African culture has been, it keeps us from the freedom and the empowering innovation of the future, Afrofuturism. So we appreciate our ancestors for laying a strong foundation for us. But when we are in the midst of our people, when we open the lines of communication and we stop being so afraid to come close enough to each other to have arguments, then we get into the mindset that, guess what? The future is ours to create. African people, you are just as strong today as your ancestors were. They are in you. And so I want to empower you today to feel as if you have the innovation, you have the creativity to design the future. So what language will we speak? Hell, let's create one. Like, all right, sweet Kiswahili was cool. The, Arabic influence, like that Sudanese Arabic and, all the words that work for them. That's great. That's cool. But I don't feel like I'm any less connected to that African rhythm because I speak English, because I still have that heartbeat inside my chest. We are the rhythm people. And as long as we can feel that heartbeat inside our chest, we can always find our way home. We can always find our way forward because it is our guide. It is our connection. And I think that when we realize that culture is more than just the music, we realize that it is everything that we do is the culture. So it's not just the traditional mediums. And when you accept that and really believe it, then you start using that creativity when developing any institution. And so I think that looking in the past and at systems that have worked in the past, like Mansa Musa. I mean, you look at him, the third generation in the 13th century. He literally made a voyage across the continent, distributing gold, inflating and deflating economies to the point where literally gold was no longer like a thing. It wasn't even valuable because in Mali, where he was from, books were the currency. That was the most valuable thing you could have. At this same era in history, the 13th century, literally in Europe, people were dying of the Black Plague because they hadn't yet learned to wash their hands properly. And the rats, it was an infestation. And I look at that history not to try to recreate what Mansa Musa did per se, but to empower myself to know that I too can create. I too am a part of Mansa Musa's legacy. And so, how many more generations am I removed from that greatness? So, I just want us to remember as we have a discussion of what right is, that we're not looking for one answer and we're not looking for a uniform replication of the past. It's for us to design the future, and we have the capacity to do so.
So, Sam, y'all, thank you, sisters. Y'all definitely are on point. Blacktricity is what I call it. And that is not just on the, like she said, the singing and the dancing level. Blacktricity is in us. And many of us are our ancestors returned. And it is important for us to know that it is critical for that Blacktricity to link up with the Blacktricity of the world. And that is, agriculture is culture. Knowing how to grow food, knowing how to be an engineer, build roadways, all of that is culture, because we've done it before and we built this country. We built North America, man. So, we have the creative ability to recreate and to create. So if we did not have it before and we think we need it now, we can create it. We have that ability. I mean, I like to say Blacktricity is learning that you don't accept projects, you want the pyramid. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So, we have to get this Yorugu out of us and re-Africanize ourselves. And part of that is a part of the process. And it's been happening. It's not new. I mean, I love what I see happening with young brothers and sisters. I mean, I talk to my grandchildren and my children all the time. The reality is, the time is now for Africans to return to their greatness, to their traditional greatness. And it ain't tomorrow, it's now. And we have the ability to do it. And we need to stop begging someone else. I call them our lost soul children. You see, because I'm not anti anybody, but our lost soul children are out of whack. And our lost soul children, unfortunately, are not just Yorugu. We got lost soul children that look just like you and me. That does not mean that they cannot come home. That does not mean that we cannot try to help them, but we can no longer expect a lost mind to take us back to sovereignty. So you don't need a lot of people. You need quality thinking people to put together the kind of structures you said we already had, Sam. We had them a long time ago. And when you got structures that can provide the basics of needs of humanity, such as food, clothing, land, shelter, security, all of those brothers and sisters that were afraid of listening at us will come running to us. So what I'm saying is, the revolution is taking place. And they used to say it ain't gonna be televised, it ain't gonna be on the internet. No, it's gonna be very live.
Oh yeah.
And it's gonna be very live. But that does not mean we don't utilize technology to spread the word, which is what we're doing today, reasoning. And out of the reasoning, we learn from each other. And again, each one teach one, each one reach one. No matter how old you are, no matter how much you know, you can learn from someone who just came out of elementary school, and vice versa. So you got to be able to each one teach one. And that's African culture. Yeah. When you go deep into African culture, you will find out it's not about the chief telling everybody which way to go. It's about the chief being a humble servant to the needs of the community. And if that chief is no longer a humble servant to the needs of the community, you remove him and get another chief. And that is African. This whole Eurocentric thing of this and this, I mean, that's why we're dealing with 45 today, because the Eurocentric thing is gonna die. It can't last for thousands and millions of years like we've lasted. And we are resilient. So no matter how tough this pandemic may be, oh, and I'm gonna tell everybody, I'll say it loud and clear. We got cures for the COVID. We don't need to take vaccines. I said it, and I'm not gonna try to explain it. All you gotta do is just get with us, and I'll tell you many ways that you can address it. So all this poppycock about we gotta wait for a vaccine, no, that's foolishness. The reality is we gotta be self-reliant, and we have to be very realistic about this whole pandemic. It's serious, but guess what? we've come through pandemics and we will go through more pandemics. And thank goodness the African continent is not like South America and North America, but they also have to be on guard as well. And that's why right now your US passport is nowhere near as strong as it was at one time. You can't just jump up and go anywhere. So change is in the air. I know we're going to win, but we also have to look at the war. We've been too many times trying to play defense. Now what I see is us learning how to be a little more offensive.
Yeah, that's just what yeah. Man, please finish your point. You know, my fault, man.
No, that was it. I'm saying once you see, you can't win any game anywhere if you just play defense. You got to be offensive. And the psychological warfare that's taking place right now is critical where it relates to Africans rising and knowing themselves. And like Sister Kim said, you got to know what time it is. It's, when you got people running around fighting each other over not wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, you got chaos and confusion. But out of that, Sun Ra said, hey, space is the place, and out of chaos and confusion comes order, once you know who you are.
Ashe. All right, family, I'm about to read this text to y'all. So for those of y'all who happen to have Black Africa at home, feel free to go to page 16 at any point tonight or in the near future. I'm going to read, all right? And Sheikh Anta Diop is making the argument of just what we've been talking about tonight about how we have more resources than what we think, and how, just like Sis Kim Poole said earlier, if we think differently about currency and think differently about our resources and how to manipulate them, then we can definitely imagine a new future for the African diaspora. So I'm about to read this for y'all. Page 16 of Black Africa by Sheikh Anta Diop. We must stop fooling the masses with minor patchwork and bring about the ultimate break with all the fake structures, Commonwealth, Euro-Africa, which have no historical future. Black Africa must finally and definitely be started up the slope toward its federal destiny. We cannot go on running with the hare and hunting with the hounds. The African countries in the year ahead will be forced progressively to strengthen their organic federal ties while ridding themselves of the remains of those that bind them still to their former, quote, mother countries, end quote. Last paragraph, and this one's very important, y'all. This need in no way result in economic chaos. West Africa alone, if federated, has an economic potential greater than that of France and England combined. That is, greater than that of the two countries most likely to impose economic sanctions on us. Naturally, that economic potential has to be developed. This creates problems of manpower and investment.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing a question of resources, a question of man and woman power, right? A question of investing time, and really laying a foundation for something that's going to last generations. I'm of the Rasta-livity, in many respects, and one key factor is staying away from vanity, not having a vain heart. And vanity is the destruction of humankind in the sense that the Urugu give us trinkets like cash, dollars, fiat money, so-called cars, things like that, to distract us from the true wealths of our African society, families, networks, food, things like that. So a lot of what Brother Sheikh Anta Diop or Baba Sheikh Anta Diop is talking about is building resources and looking inside of ourselves for what we got in order to sustain ourselves as Africans. And the African continent, the countries in it, haven't been able to do that because they still have ties to their former to their colonialists. We call it neo-colonialism. What are your thoughts about that? Anybody want to reason on that real quick, just based on what they've been seeing or hearing? Well, I got a question for y'all. My question is, to what degree are we prepared to go after colonialism? We talked about being on the offensive now. what are we willing to do? Because it's not gonna, stop. We push back, they push back. We get one little reform, they're lynching 5 of our men. You understand? Or women, brothers and sisters. You understand? So to what lengths are we willing to go to get what we want? And once again, part of it is looking at it differently, everything differently, right? So, and by no means am I being heartless, but I look at 2020, the year of COVID and racial protest, as a year of transition. And transition oftentimes means that a lot of our people will leave the physical, but those times are just what we call the reckoning, a changing of the guard. And with that comes losses that are not really losses, but are transitions. And by no means am I disregarding the deaths of people who have, died from COVID. But what I'm saying is that COVID and this war that we have going on right now is a result of Urugu not taking care of the earth and exploiting everybody, right? So it's all pushback. But my question is, knowing that, right? Because a lot of us don't know that. A lot of us will like backpedal. We'll speak out a bit. We'll speak out against anti-Semitism, and then they take our money, and then we backpedal, right? We can't even take not having their money. We can't even do what Muhammad Ali did. You understand? He lost his belt, his championship, for not wanting to be in the Vietnam War. So, to what degree are we willing to go as Africans to get Europeans and other, racial, ethnic backgrounds, non-African people outside of our communities, things like that? To what degree are we willing to go? What does that look like right now?
Well, I'll just say that, Sam, you hit the nail on the head. The battle is in the mind, first and foremost. We've had physical, protection, and we've had uh,
Hello? Well, yeah, the mental protection part, that's very important, because that's where everything starts. The spiritual warfare is very real. They're hitting us from all corners. We take out one of them, they take out 5 of us. To what degree do we have to go to be on the offensive? What does that look like right now? Is it, what are your thoughts about that? Anybody, feel free to jump in.
Well, Garvey said, look for him in the whirlwind. And I've been doing that for years because I understand that our ancestors are very much alive. That's a kind of loaded one, Sam, because everybody is not ready to make that ultimate commitment of life for the movement. However, that's ultimately what our ancestors did. They've actually given their blood. When we say praise the red, the black, and the green coming up on 100 years, everybody's got the red, black, and green now, but everybody don't know what the red, black, and green stands for. The blood is red. The black is for the African race. And the green is for the African land or land. And it's important for us to recognize that coming up this August is a centennial. And I just want y'all to be prepared, because believe me, our ancestors are alive and they're moving. And ready or not, unfortunately, not enough of us are doing the kind of things, Sam, that require the kind of Kazi work that you're saying that is needed. But it takes time. And I personally believe that we are seeing people come to a point where we're organizing to put the things together that are required to defeat the system of white terrorism. I personally believe as we build and come out of that, we'll be successful. Very few people are ready to come out of that because those of us that are conscious have not collaborated and consolidated enough to create new paradigms for other brothers and sisters to exodus out of that, if you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's up to the few of us. And when I say few, I'm not talking about small numbers, because there's a lot of Africans, but it's a lot of Pan-Africanists working together. I don't only work with the UNIA that's been around for over 100 years. I work with Basani, the Black Star Action Network International, and I'm very proud to say that they're mostly young brothers and sisters all around the world that are working to change the paradigms. I could give you a lot of other examples, but bottom line, it's going to require sacrifice and a lack of fear to do what we've been called to do. This movie that's coming up this weekend is critical for all Africans to tune into. So you can learn how important economic power is. Because with the economic power that you control, you can put other things in place that can provide the security and the cultural upliftment that we need. So I know I kind of danced around your question because it's hard to answer for everybody, but certainly for those of us that are conscious, we need to quit the ego stuff. We need to consolidate our resources. All these organizations, if Garvey, if Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, Julius Nyerere, Sheikh Anta Diop, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Marcus Garvey, and many, many others could do it, we can too. Because they were men and women just like you and me. So the reality is there's nothing that we cannot do, and we will do what must be done, because remember what I said earlier, everyone else is our lost soul children. We are the Black man and woman, the African man and woman, the founders of life on this planet. What comes around goes around. So we're experiencing a combination of evolutionary change and revolutionary change, because the environment, and you touched on it earlier, if we're abusing the environment, then we're abusing ourselves. And I don't see Yurugu doing anything to try to change that direction. We have to be science par excellence that Marcus Garvey taught us. We have to use our engineering skills and our engineering ability to create everything we need and to get away from and stop white terrorism.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Baba. Najai, the floor is yours. So at this point, it's about 6:10. We're going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes. What I wanted to do before we wrapped up is once again put this event in proper context for y'all. So right now, if you're not aware, there's a global movement going on. Of course, people are awake who weren't before, or I would say this moment, much different than others, is just the rapidness with which you see some little reforms here and there, or just talks about reforms, reparations bills being passed here and there, people changing names, things like that, so it's a very critical time. I just think that all in all, education and organization are two very important concepts. And, I just want to leave it there. I really want to encourage people to not be so hot on joining anything and taking on any slogan and, speaking out for any specific cause without educating yourself and understanding yourself. I think that's very clear. And that comes first with identifying as an African. This flag right here represents that. That is my closing statement. Pan-African federalism is a manifestation of that flag and what it represents. We're coming on a centennial, so nationhood is very important, and we have to self-identify not only as Black people, but as Africans with a Black consciousness, especially those of us living here in the Western world, you know, so that when we reconnect with our brothers and sisters on the continent, we can exchange information, and they too can understand more deeply the wickedness of that who is the minority and who has been causing terror for millennia. The floor is open, you know, to whoever wants to give a closing statement before we wrap up our first reasoning.
I just want to hail up my brother Chris who's watching, and brother Kwabena, and it's quite a few people watching, and brother Tafari. And I want to say to them that it's not about me, he or she, it's about we collectivity. I want to thank Sam for this opening Thursday reasoning, and it's going to be going on all the way up until the 13th of August. I certainly want to thank the queens, the sisters who have joined us, because as an African, I can't be in any kind of forum with others, particularly not sisters, without recognizing the fact that we as Africans have to recognize we come through the Black womb. And as Doc Ben said, that's equivalent to heaven. So I want to thank the sisters for taking time out to come give some reasoning. And Kim, keep doing what you're doing. My sister Najai, keep doing what you're doing, because for real, brothers are waking up, and y'all keep on doing what you're doing, because together is better. And the Blacktricity that flows between us will be successful. The question is how long do we have to wait? Brother Bob Marley say, how long will we stand aside while they kill our prophets and watch? So I just say, thank you all. I really appreciate this. And that's my closing statement, Sam, for now, because like I said, it ain't about me, he or she, it's about we. Collectivity in the 21st century, with true Blacktricity and the right collectivity, there's nothing that Africans cannot do.
Shay, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry that my technology dropped off in the middle of my statement, but I just want to say, you know, Sam, it's been a minute, but you're still right on point, doing exactly what you need to be the mouthpiece of our community. I can't think of a better microphone to amplify our message. I'm so thankful that you've convened this space today. We are the Rhythm People. Shout out to your queen. I know her. She's not on this call today, but I know that we sometimes take for granted all of the connective tissue and all of the vibration that keep us in the forefront afloat. And so I want to shout out to her, that shero that helped keep you sane and together in this space. And I just want to shout out to all my sheroes, Global African Sheroes Union. Protect your womb, protect your sister, protect your nation. Women, it is your time. It is now. I need you to step into the leadership position. It's time for us to work in partnership, and you have been a silent partner for far too long. And so I'm ready to hear your voice. I'm ready for you to ensure that our children and, any one of our leaders are going to recognize your power and strength as the matrilineal societies and the queendoms that we come from. So thank you again, Sam, for bringing me here. And today is my Earth Day.
Oh,
Sam
wow.
me,
Happy
and I
Earth
was like,
Day,
oh
dear.
my God, I gotta weigh in, Sam. I'm not prepared for this. But you know what? I know if you're gonna be moderating, then I should be right on point too. So thank you again, love, and I look forward to tuning into the reasoning in the future.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thank you. Sis Najai, if you're available.
Yeah, I had an issue getting with the technology, but
Yeah.
happy birthday, Sister Kim.
Yes.
Thank you, Queen.
Thank
Shira.
you. And thank you, Sam, for giving us this platform to talk about the issues and giving me the platform as a young person. It's really difficult watching everything, watching Urugu fall apart and all of us kind of be drained of the energy. But it is so important that we stay in tune with everything that's going on. A lot of scandals are coming up when it comes to child sex trafficking. And that's like where I've been spending a lot of my time and research and trying to figure out what can be done. you know, we were talking about language earlier, and I think that dedication and discipline is one of the main reasons why it's important to learn another language. It takes a lot of discipline and dedication, and our children are literally being, you know, snatched up and have been, but it seems that at a rate now we're learning that it's not just they're being snatched up and, oh, what happened to them? They're literally being either sold into slavery or being tortured. And it is really not a game. And more, I have less patience for people that aren't ready to mobilize and do something for the children. So I want to thank you, Brother Sam, for being one of those serious African people that are about the people and aren't playing any games out here. Same goes to you, Baba Senghor.
Yes. Yeah, Sam, let me just say a happy Earth Day solar natal return to Sister Kim. Sister Kim, thank you so much for taking the time out on your Earth Day. That just shows the dedication that you have of uplifting our people. And I'm so glad that we're in the same posse because all of us need to come closer together and we learn from each other. But just keep doing what you're doing, Sister Kim, and enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy all the rest of the year. And to know that all of us brothers ain't sleep. Sister Najai, I really appreciate you always, and the work that we're doing here in Banneker City is critical. Sam, you know how I feel about you, brother. You know, I got one spiritual son, Brother Harua Forayata, and I'm about to pull you into that mix because I see a lot of similarities of you all, and it is important for you to stay consistent and stay balanced. And I'm going to do the same thing. I mean, you know, I see myself as a youth too, because we all are children of the Most High. So no matter how old you get, you always got somebody to answer to. And Senghor means descendant of the ancestors, but it ain't about me, what you see. It's about the mystery, the Tricity that flows through me and you, which is our ancestors. And it's more ancestors than us. Y'all got me? It's more ancestors than us, you see? And so, you know, and it ain't about one, it's about two. And two is about four. And four really is about eight. And that's where you come from. And that's our bloodline.
Man, thank you so much. I think we should end off on that note, but not before really encouraging people to consider answering the call. You know, I think that, I don't think at all. I know that this is a call that is important now more than ever. We're coming up on 100 years since, you know, with the flag and all, you know, the 1920s in particular, very, very powerful time in the history of, you know, on this side of the world. Well, not even this side, just the world. So we're coming up on the 2020s. We got a long way to go. So it's best that we organize, you know, in addition to mobilizing. Looking forward to seeing y'all here next Thursday, 5:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have some more guests on The Reason. If any one of y'all want to come back on The Reason some more, you're more than welcome. This is your platform too. It's not just about me. It's about the whole community. So I love y'all, and I'm looking forward to more reasoning and a more solution making, y'all. Peace and blessings.
All right, greetings, everybody.
Peace.